call to order this meeting of the Budget Committee. We'll begin with the land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that we are on the lands of the Anishinaabe Nation. This spot where we gather is the traditional land of the Three Fires Confederacy, the Ottawa, Potawatomi, and Ojibwe. We also recognize that this land is now home to the Delaware Nation. This land was settled through the McKee Purchase Treaty of 1790, and we, as beneficiaries of the treaty, must recognize our responsibilities, including our collective responsibilities to the land and water. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest for open session agenda items this evening? Seeing none, I want to start by thanking Gord, Steve, and the budget team for their ongoing work, and all administration for their diligence in developing this budget following council direction in what is a uniquely challenging time. In this introductory evening, we'll be reviewing the draft budget, and for those watching at home, it's important to note it's just that, a draft budget. After this evening, the public and ultimately the Budget Committee take ownership of the budget to finalize and move our community forward. As part of that public input, we again this year have an opportunity on January 18th at 12 o'clock and January 19th at 7 for some online budget information sessions. So individuals can submit questions in advance and participate online, ask questions of administration, and provide some input, which ultimately will guide this committee as we move forward. With that, we'll move into our introductory information session tonight, and I will pass it over to Michael.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So first of all, I'm not sure, I just want to confirm that the people who are online can hear, so I couldn't. Judy, can you just confirm that the folks who are online are hearing the... Okay, excellent. Thank you. So just briefly, I'm going to repeat what the chair said. I just want to, this is my first budget here. I really want to thank Gord and his team. It's a lot of work, I think, as everybody knows, in terms of getting a budget done. And they've just done a fantastic job. So it's not just the budget team who are here, most of them on the left there, but also the extended management team. Our partners in police and obviously all of our general managers here, and it also extends down to our senior management team as well. You know, I've been told, because this is my first budget, that we've had more meetings this year as an EMT than before. I think I'm partially to blame for that because I had a lot of questions to ask, but also this is a really challenging economic climate, and I don't think any CAO across the province or any treasurer across the province this year relishes presenting a budget. It's a really difficult year, especially with inflation and uncertainty going forward. So I think we were just committed to trying to bring something forward that council can work with, and to try to recognize that you know, inflation is something that is very hard to absorb. And I don't want to steal Gord's thunder, but I think we're really pleased with what we've done, at least on the operating side. We think we've really tightened our belts, recognizing that it's a very difficult and challenging economic time. So I just want to thank the team for all the work that they've done, and we're looking forward to you know, real wholesome conversation, and hopefully we'll get to a point where everybody's relatively pleased with what the end product is. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Budget Chair, and welcome to the Budget Committee. Just to introduce myself once again, Gord Quinton, Chief Financial Officer of Chatham-Kent, and I'll be presenting the 2023 draft budget along with Steve Brown, our Director of Budget and Performance Services. 2023 is the 25th anniversary of Chatham-Kent, and tonight we embark on a new chapter of our budget processes and presentation, highlighted by the new budget book released tonight online for all citizens, council, and staff to view. Transferring to this new format was accomplished by first council approving the funding for the new software in a previous budget, but more to the dedicated group of budget division staff who have embraced this new technology and unlocked its potential. I congratulate the entire group on this monumental task and the thousands of hours it took to bring it to where it is today. Migrating to this platform greatly increases the transparency of Chatham-Kent's financial operations while transforming the information into an easy-to-read format. This takes Chatham-Kent to the leading edge of budget presentation following best practices used across Canada. It's truly inspiring. That's the title of our budget, Inspiring Chatham-Kent. Tonight we hand the budget to the new council. It's council's budget and you now own it. The 2023 budget process began in the spring of 2022 with the former council, with CK Plan 2035 and the 2018 to 2022 council term priorities guiding staff in the direction taken in this budget. Chatham-Kent employees follow the lead of council, and this budget does the best to implement council's plans. CK Plan 2035 is a foundation document and has 7 pillars in our strategic planning that leads us to community health and growth. We have to consider each and every one of these when forming the draft budget. On the screen are our 4 priority areas of economic prosperity, people and culture, healthy and safe communities, and environmental sustainability, which are guiding the budget priorities. Over the long term, we have to pay attention to all these to meet our community goals. In addition, financial sustainability is important. We have paid down almost all the municipality tax-funded debt and have adopted a pay-as-you-go philosophy to save current and future taxpayers the high cost of financing projects. We now consider debt only on large new facilities or projects and not for the replacement of current infrastructure. Open and transparent government is a cornerstone, and the new format of this year's budget is another step we have taken to build on our solid financial foundation. We have completed a budget survey in advance of forming this budget, and the budget chair and senior staff will be engaging the public over the next couple weeks prior to us deliberating the budget. And you can't think of Chatham-Kent without knowing that we are a resilient community, as we have certainly shown that over the last few years with the numerous emergencies and opportunities that we've embraced. The ability of our staff to be able to professionally deal with everything we faced is amazing, but it's also about the financial resiliency of Chatham-Kent and adapting to change and taking advantage of new opportunities. As I noted before, we are working off the previous council term priorities. The new council will be working on their own term priorities in about 6 weeks, and that'll lead us into our first multi-year budget for 2024 to 2027. And those deliberations are being scheduled for November and early December 2023. And council, you'll be getting those dates in your calendar shortly. For this budget, growth has certainly taken a high priority. Having new people come to the community and using our facilities lowers the cost for all citizens. Infrastructure, public transit, and recreation facilities are paramount in building a community. We also need to remember to evaluate our inventory of assets and consider changes to keep costs low and allow for the investment in better used assets. Environmental sustainability is our second priority. Adapting to climate change, protecting the environment, and being able to be financially prudent on finding both cost savings, but also lowering our carbon footprint is important. Chatham-Kent declared a climate emergency, and this council will be key to directing our next steps on what to do and what we can do to protect our future, including the best farmland in Ontario. Community wellness is the third priority. Mental health, addictions, health facilities, affordable housing, and an equity approach are priorities brought through many budget asks this year. The pandemic also certainly had an impact on mental health, addictions, and homelessness in Chatham-Kent, and the cost implications will be around for years. Providing parks, promoting physical activity are one of the ways to counter some of these negative impacts. And last, council also had a focus on community engagement. We need our citizens' input, and we continue to outreach to the public in the budget process, and and as we implement many of the budget items that you'll see in the document. Now I'll turn it over to Steve.
Thanks, Gord. So tonight we'll be taking a look at the new budget book, reviewing the operating budget summary and the impact of assessment growth on the 2023 budget. Gord will then bring council through the consumer price index and the capital budget, while I follow up with the tax and other information. We'll finish the night with any citizens or organizations that will be providing any deputations to council. So this is our first year using the new budget book format. And over the next couple of slides, I'll provide you with some highlights on where council can find all of the relevant information so that you're able to make informed decisions. So the new budget book document provides council and the public with greater details of not only the 2023 operating budget, but the base budget summaries, descriptions of department and their responsibilities, and also Chatham-Kent's capital budget. The document is broken out into four main categories. Firstly, you will see the operating and capital summaries, along with other relevant information. Secondly, the operating budget is broken down by department and division, with each business case for council's consideration being included within the divisional budget. Going through the book further, after the departmental budget, the business cases that are not recommended are therefore not included within the budget request are included for council's consideration. Finally, we have the capital budget, which includes the capital new and the capital asset management plan. The capital new is what many refer to as the capital budget. And then prior to this year, you would recall there was a separate report that went to council on a regular Monday night meeting. Capital AMP are the projects that the corporation anticipates undertaking during the 23 budget year. And the project details are provided for council and the public. In the past, many smaller projects were grouped and an RTC was brought to council to follow Chatham-Kent's reserve and reserve fund policy. So they were brought to council because they didn't meet, they had to come because of reserve and reserve fund policy. However, they didn't need to come because of the Chatham-Kent's purchasing bylaw. So by approving the capital budget this year, the smaller projects such as minor culvert replacements and small equipment will not need to come to council as long as they are both listed within the capital budget and they do not meet the purchasing bylaw threshold for council's approval. So for each budget request outside of maintained existing service levels, there'll be a business case that will be included to provide council with the knowledge it needs to make the informed decision. The business cases include relevant information and highlight the costs or revenue associated with any request, along with any FTE requirements. So let's take a closer look at what a business case looks like and the information that it includes. We have the business case name, which helps to explain what the request is. We also have the department that is responsible for that request. The business case then includes a summary of the request and what the financial implications are, and if there's any impact on the proposed tax rate. Moving further down, the link to the strategic plan is provided, along with any risks associated with not proceeding with the business case. The business case continues with a strategic focus and that the request supports and provides any additional information that both council and the public can click on. While this business case does not include any FTE changes, any business cases that do have an FTE component will also include a chart highlighting the FTE breakdown by both base and one time. Over the next several slides, we'll look at the draft budget increase, revenues and expenses, and also the requested FTEs. The 2023 draft budget includes a requested tax increase of 6.35% and has been broken down into four separate categories. The first of which is maintain existing service levels, which has an increase of 0.61%. This category includes such items as inflation on operating costs, fuel, utilities, staff cost of living increases, interest income, and assessment growth. In the budget book, these are not included within the business cases. However, a listing of each item is included in the operating budget summary. The second category details providing provincial funding changes. As has been discussed previously, Chatham-Kent saw a significant decrease in its Ontario Municipal Partnership funding, which has resulted in a 0.51% increase being included in the 2023 draft budget. The third category relates to the increase in capital, including 1.5% capital levy and 6% inflation on our existing asset management plan, which has been partially offset by an increase in the Canada Community Building Fund revenue. The capital budget accounts for 58% of the 2023 draft budget increase. Lastly, we have business cases which make up 1.58% of the requested budget. These are included within each department's breakdown in the budget document, include service level and staffing changes that meet Council's strategic plan. Comparing the base and one-time budgets between 2022 and 2023 by department, you will note that the total expenses of municipality are projected to increase by 4.6%. Looking at the more significant changes, you will note that the mayor and council budget has seen a substantial increase in 2023 as council has approved the implementation of the Hydro One Community Support Agreement. The Chief Administrative Office, which contains legal services, includes an increase in insurance premiums that council approved in late 2022. Corporate Services saw a decrease in its budget compared to 2022 as a result of one-time projects that were funded in the 2022 budget that do not carry forward to the 2023. And finally, non-departmental contains the capital budget levy and asset management plan inflation, along with closed session items that will be rolled out to respective departments after budget approval. Taking a look at revenue by department, the most significant changes to note are within the CAO area, as administration recommended funding part of the insurance premium increases from reserves in 2023. Similar to the expense chart, corporate services is seeing a large decrease in its revenues as the one-time projects funded from reserves in 2022 do not carry forward to the 2023 budget. Finance, budget, and information technology saw a decrease in revenues for similar reasons as corporate services, as one-time projects in 2022 do not carry forward to the 2023 budget. Based on the draft budget being presented tonight, total revenues are expected to increase by 1.7% over 2022 levels. The difference between revenues and expenses require an $11.1 million tax increase. And that equates to 6.35%. Taking a look at operating expenses by category, the largest portion of Chatham-Kent's expenses are employee-related, directed at employee wages and benefits. Transfer to reserves are the budgeted transfer reserves for contingency, stabilization, and risk management. Transfer to reserves are also for capital assets, which are planned or unanticipated projects, and for the repair and maintenance of existing municipal assets. The largest proportion of Chatham-Kent's revenue come from property taxes, followed by provincial and federal grants. User fees for such items as arenas, sports fields, hall rentals, and building permits make up the next largest category of revenue in the 2023 draft budget. The draft budget includes a proposal for an additional 41.52 FTE. It must be noted that the only FTE that has a tax impact is the Infection Prevention and Control Lead at Riverview Gardens. This position has been mandated by the province and therefore has already been hired after being approved and report to council. All other positions have either been funded from upper levels of government or through savings that staff have been able to realize within their respective departments. Of the base positions, over 50% of the requests are a result of the implementation of 4 hours of care at Riverview Gardens, which is funded by the province. The next largest portion of staff, allied health professionals, and the Canada-wide learning and childcare are also funded by upper levels of government. Taking a look at one-time staff requests, the budget includes a proposal for an additional 45.75 FTE. It must be noted that one-time FTE only impact the current year and are not added to the base budget, so they have no impact on future years without a future year budget approval. Most of the one-time positions are funded by reserves for that purpose. There is no impact on the proposed 2023 tax increase from the one-time positions that are included in the budget. This chart highlights the approved budgets from 2019 to 2022, a proposed budget for 2023, in our projected budget increases from 2024 to 2027. The future year's tax impact provides a conservative projection of what Chatham-Kent is estimating for budget increases over the next 4 years. With projecting out 4 years, there's always going to be many unknowns, such as changes in provincial funding. As we move into the development of the 2024 to 2027 multi-year budget later this year, we will also be looking to start building a rate stabilization reserve to mitigate any of the significant events in the future. With that said, we are currently projecting over the next 4 years that we'll be looking at a 6 to 7% tax increase annually, a large portion of which is continuing to fund our capital assets. So taking a look at how assessment growth has impacted the 2023 budget, Chatham-Kent saw significant growth in 2022, leading to assessment growth in excess of $3 million being included in the 2023 budget. Following the council-approved assessment growth policy, the first 0.8% of total assessment, which equals $1.4 million for 2023, goes directly towards lowering the tax rate. The assessment growth over 0.8% of total assessment is allocated towards business cases submitted by departments during the budget process, which have seen increased costs as a result of that growth, such as an increased kilometer of paved roads. These business cases are included under each division that had the request for the use of these funds and have been recommended for council's consideration. This diagram presented here outlines all business cases that have been recommended for the use of the available assessment growth funds. This diagram is also included within the draft budget document. Each of these requests can be attributed to an increased cost related from growth, from the need for greater volumes of salt and a snowplow to clear roads, a public works employee, and year 2 of the ambulance phase-in approved by council during the 2022 council or budget deliberations. The assessment growth being included in the 2023 budget is the greatest we have seen in recent history. And unlike previous years, where a few large non-residential properties were newly assessed, such as the Enbridge Panhandle Pipeline or the casino in Chatham, the 2023 assessment growth is primarily attributed to residential growth, with 69% of the total assessment growth coming from the residential property class. With the increase in interest rates that we've seen in 2022, we do anticipate that by 2024, we'll start seeing the growth come back in line with what we've seen in previous years. I'll now turn it over to Gord to talk about the Consumer Price Index.
So if I had to sum up the budget in 2 words, it's inflation and our infrastructure. So let's first deal with inflation. So we all hear the monthly releases of where the Canada Consumer Price Index is going, and we've all experienced it when we go to buy groceries or our goods at a store. Prices are skyrocketing everywhere. CPI attempts to measure the price increases of an average person faces in a month. So food, shelter, transportation, and all the items listed on the left there. So, but municipalities also face cost pressures as well, but it's often a different basket of goods. So here I have what I'm calling the municipal price increase. And examples are labor costs, contracted service, social assistance costs, building maintenance, rentals and purchase of equipment, specialized supplies such as asphalt and chemicals and construction services. So it's quite different than regular CPI, what a homeowner would experience. And in many cases, it's actually been even more than CPI, the increases that we faced this year. For example, some of our paving contracts saw 25% increases for the same kilometer of road over the previous year. So we do hope that some of these increases that we did experience in 2022 were temporary. There were, of course, supply chain interruptions and price of oil and fuel and things that really spiked that I think have come down, and will return to normal over time. But it is likely that a large amount of these increases that we experience are now embedded permanently. And that's particularly for our infrastructure. That's why we did go with a 6% increase in our asset management plan. Statistics Canada, just noting that it does not track MPI. This is just an example of what we would like to track, and that's why we often just use CPI as a benchmark. But just wanted to illustrate that we've actually faced worse than the 6.85% CPI. Here's just giving the last 4 years plus a projection of where we're headed with CPI. So if I added 10 more years to the left, CPI for the last decade has run around the 2% target that the Bank of Canada has as their target. It would go up, in the 1 to 3 range, but basically they were on target with the 2%. We then had the pandemic. No one bought for a bit, and prices dropped, but then of course it skyrocketed, and there was the supply chain and other issues that happened. So we have added what our best forecast is using Bank of Canada forecasts for 2023 and 2024, and importantly we see it coming down at least close to the 2% again by 2024. And secondly, the cost of infrastructure is most of our proposed budget increase at 3.65%, or as Steve said, 58% of our recommended tax increase. So we have the three core categories. Approximately $7.5 million of funds we set aside to deal with new items, not the replacement of the existing items. So for example, Next Generation 911 had a $1 million capital, new capital budget hit in this budget. Our asset management plan was updated in 2022 as required by the province. And we currently fund approximately 50% of what is required in our asset management plan, which would be, we need $124 million annually to properly or fully maintain all our assets, and we currently only have $62 million in the budget. So put another way, we can only accomplish about half of the rebuilds and infrastructure improvements that we should be doing. And by not doing maintenance and upkeep required, a community's infrastructure will eventually crumble and start to fail. And none of us want that in our community, and that's why EMT has recommended the amounts in this budget. And breaking out the 3.65% in more detail, we have the capital levy, the inflation, and a small bit of good news from upper level funding. If you recall, in June of 2022, Council did commit to adding 1.5% tax equivalent to the asset management plan. And Council also committed to provide at least 6% inflation adjustment to the 2022 level. Then we did receive a small amount from the federal government in the Canada Community Building Fund that provided 0.16% of tax relief. The total impact being 3.65%. So once again, I'll sound like a broken record on this, but I will say to the upper levels of our government, if anyone's listening, we need you to share in funding this, our asset management plan, and that goes across all of Ontario. The province once again did freeze our Ontario community infrastructure funding at the $10 million figure for 2023. And if you think of it, with the inflation that was experienced, if you could pave 10 kilometers of road just last year with provincial money, you could now only pave 8 kilometers this year. So them freezing it really with inflation is a reduction. because we've received no inflation adjustments in either the, from the federal or provincial governments in our infrastructure funding. Chatham-Kent property taxpayers are being asked for more than $6.4 million in this budget to keep our asset management plan on track. On top of this, we face costs in healthcare, emergency services, and other area that have some portions of provincial jurisdiction. And so council, please continue to lobby for more upper level assistance, and if you can, try to explain to your constituents that we do have to fund our assets on our own without future changes coming from the provincial and federal governments. The 2023 draft capital budget invests in these high-level categories on the screen. And note that this is indicating our capital spending plan for 2023. Our funding plan for a specific category may be higher or lower than these amounts as we raise funds over time for many of our larger projects. So sometimes, for example, you see money saved up in life cycle reserves, planning ahead for a larger upcoming project in 2024, 2025, for example. The road network is our largest category of spending for 2023 at $26 million. This includes arterial, collector, residential streets, and gravel roads. Again, full details of what we plan on spending on this year are in the budget book, and you can find details on projects planned for your area. I'll turn it back to Steve.
Thanks, Gord. So over the next few slides, we'll take a look at how tax policy and tax property tax give some property tax information, and we'll also look at some municipal comparators. So the budget process determines the overall financial requirements of the municipality, while tax policy determines which property class will pay what share of the overall financial requirements. Tax policy is presented to council in April and provides recommendations on tax ratio changes, which in turn may shift the proportion of the tax burden from one property class to another. Of the 5 items listed on this chart, council has control over the first 2, the approved tax levy or budget and tax policy. The education tax rates and many property tax ratios are determined by the province. While the municipality has the flexibility to have lower ratios than those prescribed by the province, we're not able to have ratios that are higher. For example, the province prescribes a limited farm tax ratio as 25% of that of a residential property. However, Chatham-Kent currently has that at 22%. So there's an example of one that we can have lower. Tax policy also takes announcements from the province, such as education rates and new legislation, such as tax ratio limits, and determining how much of the total tax requirement each property class will pay. The largest proportion of property taxes collected within Chatham-Kent come from the residential properties at 63% of the total property taxes collected. This is followed by commercial at 16% and farm at 12%. The proportion of property taxes collected from residential properties remains unchanged from 2021. One of the most common misconceptions that residents have is the impact of property reassessment. It must be noted that when the Municipal Property Assessment Corporation, commonly known as MPAC, completes a reassessment, these are revenue neutral to the municipality, therefore no new revenue. For example, if all properties within Chatham-Kent doubled in value from one assessment to the next, the overall impact of each property tax bill would be 0. If your property went up more than the average of all properties, then you could expect an increase based on the reassessment. However, the same could be said if your property went up less than the rest. You could expect that you'd have a decline in your tax burden. It should be noted that the last reassessment was completed in 2016, and the provincial government has put a pause on reassessments for now. And at this point in time, it is not known when they will reoccur. The estimated total average tax bill for Chatham-Kent residents, including the education portion, was below the provincial average for large municipalities in 2022. This is comparing a similar type of property across municipalities as calculated by BMA Management Consulting in their 2022 municipal study. In fact, Chatham-Kent had the lowest tax burden on a single detached bungalow of all municipalities with a population greater than 100,000. The ability to pay is estimated using average household income, which varies for each community. This is an important check in determining the affordability of property taxes. BMA Management Consulting also computes this affordability check in their 2022 municipal study. For the average household income the average household income in Chatham-Kent, property taxes represented about 4% of the estimated income, which is in line with the provincial average and Chatham-Kent's comparative municipalities. The average residential taxes is calculated from all residential property types and differs from the singular property type that I used on the previous slide. The information contained on this slide is provided to Chatham-Kent residents as an insert in their final tax bill. It outlines the departmental distribution of taxes on the average residential property. Since 2010, Chatham-Kent has made significant progress in lowering its overall tax-funded debt. At the end of 2022, there was approximately $7.6 million in tax-funded debt outstanding, made up of public housing, the John D. Bradley Convention Center, and Riverview Gardens. If no new debt is issued, tax-funded debt will keep falling, and by the end of 2032, there'll be no tax-funded debt outstanding. So available tonight on our website will be the 2023 draft budget documentation, along with information pertaining to our online open houses. Residents are encouraged to visit CK Let's Talk budget page to provide feedback and ask questions. The Police Service Board is currently finalizing information and will be providing a presentation to the Budget Committee on Wednesday, January the 25th, and we will have a closed presentation on labor relations at 6 p.m. on Tuesday, January 31st. With the high level of public engagement we received in our online community consultations during both the 2021 and 2022 budgets, we've made the decision to continue public consultation process online for our 2023 budget. We have scheduled 2 Facebook Live events, one on Wednesday, January 18th at noon, and the other Thursday, January 19th at 7 p.m. We have scheduled these events at different times to provide CK residents with the opportunity to not only learn about the budget, but to comment and have their voices heard. Council deliberations on the 2023 draft budget start the following week on Wednesday, January 25th at 6 p.m. Both in-person and written deputations can be submitted for each night of the Budget Committee deliberations up to 3 p.m. of each day. So we'll now move on to deputations, and we have 2 community groups that are going to present to the Budget Committee, and we will start with Chatham-Kent Health Alliance.
Thank you, Steve. It's a pleasure to be back here this evening. For those of you, if I haven't met you before, Laurie Marshall, President and CEO of Chatham-Kent Health Alliance. Mary Lou is just passing out some documents, and probably it would be helpful for me to say while we're getting set up here that if you needed to get up and stretch from a health and well-being perspective, please feel free to do so. I'm just going to ask and check if there's a pointer on this. Perfect. Well, thank you so much for welcoming us back here this evening. I am joined by a contingent of presenters this evening, so I'm going to start things off and then hand over to Brian Glover, who is a CKHA board member and someone who has deep roots in the Wallaceburg community, followed by Faye Johnson from Walpole Island First Nation, Bob Hockney, the CKHA Foundation Board Chair, and then Mary Lou Crowley, President and CEO of the CKHA Foundation, will end the presentation for us. I also want to make note of some other people who are in the audience and or that really assisted us with this particular process. So in addition to the staff and physician involvement at CKHA and what you're about to see this evening, we did have a building committee that was rounded out by community members. And the committee was chaired by Jack Carroll, who is with us this evening, who is a board member at CKHA, and included Jeff Wesley and Dr. Bill Currier from the Wallaceburg community, Kristen Campbell from the Chatham-Kent Community Health Center, that is a referral base into the hospital, and Faye Johnson, as I've mentioned earlier, is going to help us this evening with our comments. So I first want to begin and talk about, really, I'm so pleased with your theme of inspiring Chatham-Kent, and I think that this is one of the things that we hope to be doing here this evening with you as well. I recall very fondly one of my very first engagements as the CEO of Chatham-Kent Health Alliance was at the CBD Club in Wallaceburg and meeting the community. And in that meeting, there are two very specific things I heard. The first was how important that hospital site was to the Wallaceburg community. There were people that I met there that actually physically helped to build that facility. That kind of community ownership is incredible. They also said to me, though, at the time, we feel abandoned. Some of you may recall the group, Save Our Sydenham, that were very involved in terms of saving that particular hospital site. We committed very early on at that stage then to make sure that the Wallaceburg site was going to continue into the future. It is a key asset of our organization. It's something that's important for all of our communities, Wallaceburg and Walpole Island in particular, and I think you'll see from the handout that we've passed out, a number of other individuals from across Chatham-Kent also access services there. It is in our letters patent that we are two sites. It is in our mission statement. It is something that is part of our core beliefs as an organization, and so we're delighted this evening to share with you the next steps in delivering on that commitment. Fast forward to today, here are some of the numbers with respect to who's been engaged in helping us to get where we're going. The master planning process with the Ministry of Health is not something that I can probably explain in one evening. Suffice it to say, we are at stage 2. We have just completed the functional program, and it has been submitted to the Ministry of Health in December, and this is why we are here this evening then to work with you towards the next steps. Let's talk a little bit about what we've done. Many years ago, when we started down this road, there was a lot of talk about what do we really need first, and that was the power plant. If any of you have been to the Wallaceburg site and had a look at the power plant, the old power plant, we used to call it the shock and awe tour. It's a very scary place to look at the age of that equipment. The new power plant was really the backbone of the new facility. I know that we were very fortunate that Councillors McGregor and Hall were able to get out and see that new facility last week. I'm hopeful that many of the rest of you will have the chance to see it. And seeing is really believing with respect to this. The size, the scope, the scale, the technical elements that are there. This plant would not have been built if there was not intention by government to build something further. Where we are today is, as I've mentioned, the submission of the functional program. This has involved a number of individuals. It did involve us engaging professional consultants. We had a design team engaged, we had architects engaged, and professional cost consultants who then looked at the detailed costing. I can let you know that the detailed costing has been provided to administration, and they have that at their disposal to review. Really important to stress, that this new build involves the 24/7 emergency department. I know that everyone here reads the media, sees what is happening across our province with respect to emergency departments. This is critical for us as a community to continue to provide the kinds of services and care that our community deserves. 6 medicine beds, we currently have 5, and I'll talk a little bit more about how this is a little bit of a change and an update. Diagnostic imaging, our X-ray and ultrasound services, and the laboratory. What you see here is the overall schematic of what the new hospital will look like, and this is why I wanted the pointer, because there are a few things that I want to point out before we get into a little bit more detail about the proposed build. So the first is to highlight the current facility. So the west wing and the east wing, this is the main parking lot here. The new build is in what is the emergency department parking lot, for those of you who are familiar with the site. So a few things to note to give you the orientation here. The first is, here is the new power plant that's been built, and I will describe a little bit about some of the features that are helpful as a result of that build. It identifies that the east wing will be demolished, as well as the old power plant. Very important, the helipad stays where it is. No movement of the helipad here to stay. Okay. In the west wing, the area that is not highlighted is our current ambulatory care services. The yellow area is the current emergency department and the medical beds. I want you to look at the size of that area. So the current emergency department is on the right-hand side, that block. I now want you to look at the block above that is pink. That is the new emergency department of the new Wallaceburg site. More than double in size for that emergency department, and that is really something that's very critical. What this also means when I talk about this yellow block is that while this is not part of the new build, while this part of the facility is in place, this allows us to expand our ambulatory care or outpatient services. Outpatient services, ambulatory care are the things that are growing in healthcare. Beds are not growing. People want to receive their care in home, or they want to go somewhere and come back home again. This is where the true growth is, and so even though this isn't part of the project and the build, this is part of the commitment for new and growing services in Wallaceburg. Now, again, I know that you can't see the specifics on here, but I do want to just highlight a few things. This is the new build. So to again provide you with an orientation, the dark gray is the new power plant. And again, this has got boilers, it has got generators, it has got water systems, it has got security systems. It is truly state of the art from that perspective. What you see here is a corridor that has been built and is there right now. This is actually very important and significant, and our consultants have identified it in the submission to government to highlight the fact that this is already built. It's a critical, I would say, backbone in terms of circulation for everything that is here. This is where the staff will be going back and forth. This is where supplies will be going back and forth. This is also the exit to get to the helipad. If this had to be included in the whole new build, the cost of this project would have been much higher. And so this is one of the things that's actually a real bonus for us in terms of the way that the power plant was built, that circulating corridor, and the ability for us to just build out and on to it. Very, very smart planning at the time. This is the emergency department. There will be an ability to just drive up and drop off, and then there will also be a small parking lot here for emergency department visits or for individuals coming in for diagnostic imaging. The blue area here is the inpatient area of the hospital. So again, this is much larger than our current size. The rooms are much larger, and there are two particular room features that I'd like to draw to your attention. The first is this palliative care room, which we currently don't have. in the organization. This is an additional bed for Wallaceburg and allows us to provide that support at end of life that we may be challenged to currently. The other is this room here, which includes an ante-room, negative pressure. This is truly what you need in a post-pandemic world to make sure that we're able to care for individuals with infectious disease in a safe way. If any of you were in the Wallaceburg site during the height of the pandemic, at the beginning, when we had to jury rig negative pressure into both the emergency department and the medical beds, this is state of the art, and this is the kind of facility that our community deserves. The purple area here is diagnostic imaging. The beauty in this design, so you'll recall that below this is the existing west wing. Eventually that will be demolished and new ambulatory care space built in there. However, what it also allows for is this design allows for, if there was ever a need for additional beds, they can be built out in this direction, and diagnostic imaging can be built out in this direction. So if there was ever a need identified for a CT scanner, and I want to address this because I know I've been asked this question several times about whether or not there would be a CT. There is not a CT in this particular design. We worked with our consultants, we looked at a business case, and it needs to be based on need. Government approves CTs. It's not something that we can just decide we would like to purchase and to provide. It's identified that the need is not there until 2039-40 for a CT scanner and what I will say is that's for an additional CT scanner for all of Chatham-Kent. And so we have the ability to add it in here, and it would be in another and subsequent build. It is not in this particular build, if any of you were wondering about that. The yellow area is the laboratory, much smaller than our current lab. Our current lab was built when more functioning, more tests being done on site. A lot more point of care will now be done actually within the emergency department itself, and so much smaller footprint required for the lab. Project schedule. Everybody wants to know, when will we have it? And I will say that this is both an ambitious and aggressive schedule. And because of that, it gives us a goal to work towards. It is something that we need all of our support to work towards, as well as the government of Ontario to work towards. What this suggests is that if everything goes in lockstep order and very efficiently, we can have a shovel in the ground in November 2024 and the facility completed by the end of 2026. I'll spend just a little bit more time speaking about the benefits of this redevelopment before I pass things over to Brian. We've already spoken about the emergency department footprint, that doubling in size. What you have in the handout in front of you on the second page are a couple of key pieces of information. One is a pie chart that shows the distribution of the population visits to the emergency department in Wallaceburg, and that you'll see that well over 40% are coming from outside of Wallaceburg. And on the right-hand side, you see the wait times, and you see why that may be the case. The wait times at the Wallaceburg site are shorter than the Chatham site, and both sites exceed, in a good way, the provincial average. One of the things that I can say to you is that building this emergency department, having these services available, this will become even more of a destination for not only the residents within Wallaceburg and Walpole Island, but also for other members of the community from Chatham-Kent to access those services. Improved patient care. I was involved in the build of the Thunder Bay Regional Health Sciences Center, brand new facility. I can tell you there is nothing like a new hospital with new shiny equipment to attract physicians and staff to come and work in your facility, and that will lead to improved quality of patient care. Enhanced infection control, I've mentioned already some of those initiatives related to how the design, airflow, all of those sorts of things are involved. Improved patient privacy and confidentiality, just related to that additional space, as well as security. Accessibility. It's the current facility is an older facility. And, there are some washrooms that you would not be able to get a wheelchair into. There is maybe difficulty getting from one area to another. This is very important. And what I will also add in this space is ability, for example, for smudging for our First Nations opportunities. Right now, air handling in the facility, we would be limited in that ability. And so again, the way of the facility is designed allows for that. Larger patient and treatment rooms and best practice equipment and features. With that, I will ask Brian Glover to take the next steps.
Thank you very much. As Laurie suggested, I'm Brian Glover. I'm a member of the Board of Directors of the Chatham-Kent Health Alliance, and I'm also a born and raised Chatham-Kent resident. Both my wife and I grew up on farms that have been in the family for over 100 years and are very committed to not only Chatham-Kent, but to continue to be committed to the place that we grew up on. So with that in mind, and just reviewing some of the benefits that come back to Wallaceburg, and I'd suggest that benefits that come back to Wallaceburg come back to North Kent, come back to Chatham-Kent as a whole, that as the ripple effect continues to go out, and they are very important to all of us here. And as a Chatham-Kent community, we want to see that continue to grow. So as mentioned on the slides here, and I'll just quickly go over the healthcare, is an economic mainstay in our community. Growing up in Chatham-Kent, the doctors, the nurses, the additional support staff that also lived in our community, that supported our community, not only in the services they provided at the hospital, but also those services that they took part in as members of the community are very important, and that will be continuing and will hopefully grow as our community continues to grow. I think this investment in a new hospital or new design here, it guarantees and solidifies to the community that Wallaceburg area and North Kent area will have a healthcare facility for several years to come. And as an investor coming into the community, things that they look for recreation facilities, they look for education facilities, they look for healthcare. And this will be a critical part of our future, not only for Wallaceburg, but for the main area and even outside the area. Of course, we do no one gets turned away from a hospital when they're coming in on an emergency, and even though there are a number of people, as shown by the chart ahead, that take part and use the services outside our Chatham-Kent, we're open to that, and this will verify that we will continue to be open for that job. New facilities mean new systems, and there's an increase of those from in maintenance agreements, in contract agreements, in support agreements that will benefit our community and the members of our community as well. So it's not just the people that are working directly at the hospital, but for those community that support all the services that come along with it. And of course, the continuation of an emergency department in our community is critical. As a person who's had family members growing up on farms, of course, there's a lot of farm accidents that happen, and in some of those cases, time is of the essence, and a difference of 10 or 15 minutes can mean the difference of losing an arm or losing a leg, and in some cases, even much worse. So having a 24/7 emergency department continuing in Wallaceburg for that area is critical, not only for the residents, but also in attracting new businesses into the community as well. Provides more work, not only immediately during construction, but after for the local trades. We've seen that in the development of the power plant. A lot of the other facilities that are going up, you see the local trades becoming more and more involved, not only in the construction, but also the follow-up that there's going to be need for several years to come along the way. There's an increase support during construction from outside trades coming in as well, that the spin-off, again, the ripple effect that happens to our restaurants, our accommodations, our services that are required will definitely benefit. And the replacement, as an example of that, the replacement of the power plant employed 25 local and regional contracting teams over the construction time of the thing. That alone is, if you think of the economic development and economic benefits, are critical. Oops. So in engaging the community, these are the themes that we're looking at. We want to continue to emphasize there will be available emergency care services 24/7. That's a critical part of our commitment. There's a safe and secure place to receive services. You can get them on time and quickly. We will continue in the staff that we have at Chatham-Kent Health Alliance at both sites right now are phenomenal, and what they've, not only from the past, but what they've gone through in the past few years has just been an example of the commitment that our staff have, and having the best qualified staff and to have the up-to-date technology is critical for the healthcare of our community. Another theme, yes, we are all getting a little bit older. I consider it becoming more chronologically gifted, but some people say older. And there's a lot of extra services that are required, comes along with that aging population. So this will ensure that they will continue to get the support and the care that they need. And addition to that is, when we talk about support and care, is the support and care, not only recently, but in the past, the mental wellness of our community is critical. There are support services out in the Wallsburg community that will continue and be enhanced as we go further on this project. These are some comments that were delivered during the initial engagement process, and I think if you can read all of them, but the most important is if you look at some of the highlighted, that it really comes out with the themes that delivers quality of care. It's a safe haven for elderly residents. It means an ER, an ultrasound, an X-ray, it's psychiatric support, and a fully functioning emergency room. Those are the things that were important when we listened to the people when the initial consultation was taking place, and I think those are themes that need to be listened to as well throughout the whole process. And I guess the final thing, this is where I go off script sometimes, is the Wallsburg Hospital, the Sydenham site of the Wallsburg Hospital. Fortunately, we had some people almost 70 years ago have some insight to create a legacy in the community. And there's, I always talked about there's three things of a legacy that people don't want to continue to have going. There's the Legion in the community, there's the arena in the community, and there's the hospital in the community. All perform very different things, but they're all things that create a legacy that keeps memory going. And when you talk about the hospital, the legacy that our people have helped our community for the last 70 years, and hopefully will continue to help them for the next 70 years. It's interesting, a hospital you go to when you're in pain and you come out thinking nothing but positive thoughts about the care, the compassion, the quality of staff that come from that. And I hope that our current community will continue to support a legacy that'll be another 70 years plus going into the community. So with that, I will turn it over to Faye Johnson. Thank you. I don't know if you have any specifics. Yeah.
Bonjour. Nanush kushe de jakas, chigan dodem, kadrang donjaba, anishnabek kwayendao. My English name is Faye Johnson, and I am the current governance manager for Walpole Island First Nation, and also currently the interim director of operations. So I have a lot on my plate right now, and I'm very happy to be here to promote this project. I have recently moved back to my home community of Walpole Island within the last year. It hasn't even been a year yet. Coming back to the community, there's so many things that I've noticed, and when I came back to help, that's what I came back for, is to help my community. So coming back to the community, one of the first things that I noticed is that we have so many that are struggling. One of the comments that says up here is that we have psychiatric support facilities because we have so many people who are struggling through mental illness. What that doesn't say is that the mental illness is also being brought on right now because there is so much of that focus that's being put on the truth and reconciliation, as well as the discovering of the babies that were buried at these residential schools. So that intergenerational trauma is also within all of us, because no matter who you see, an Indigenous person these days, we are all suffering from that intergenerational trauma from these residential schools. I've been fortunate enough to have a lot of supports within my own personal life that I've been able to move through some of these things on my own, which is why I'm here to help my community as much as possible. With having the hospital right close also means that our community members who are right now suffering from lack of transportation, there is lots of housing issues right now that with this, we have a new chief and council, and their top priority right now is housing. And what's happening is our members are having so many issues with maintaining housing, supports, those types of things. It's becoming a real issue to where we have those who are transient and coming in and they have black toes because they are suffering from self-medicating. I'm going to say self-medicating. But they are all dealing with these addictions issues, and during that time, they suffer. And when they come into the band office seeking assistance, these are some of the things that we need to find for them. So having the hospital that's so close that and it is 24/7, we can send people there. We have people within the community, like I said, that have recently passed away because housing, right? And there's no housing and they're so cold, but it's also causing that ripple effect of now there are health issues because of those problems. Walpole Island is currently in a state of emergency for addictions. That's one of our biggest struggles right now, and trying to move forward in a positive way also requires us to have the supports from a medical team. And because transportation is such an issue, trying to get to the Chatham Hospital is a problem. So appointments, I've recently had people where we're struggling with the fact that people live in Wallaceburg, but they have appointments in Chatham. And one of the issues that I just seen on here is that, I don't know if you know, but Walpole Island is listed as Lambton County. So which means that we are out of Chatham-Kent, even though that's our closest neighbor. It's kind of weird because that's how it works. So this is where we have to, again, come to both, of the organizations that are closest to us and create those relationships so that we can look after our own people as well. But to do that, we need your support. And right now, again, with the chief and council looking at how do we do these types of things and how do we do what's best for our population, one of the biggest issues, again, it comes back to our health support. And because we have so many that are dealing with, I don't know if you are familiar, but with Indigenous people, and one of my my family, they are afraid to go to the hospital because that's not a favorite thing for Indigenous people to have to go to, because we have suffered, there's lots of racism, there's lots of, I guess, there's a history of healthcare that was taken without our consent, if that makes sense. So we were also having to do things, that was not appropriate. And these are some of those, again, residual effects of having to deal with those previous traumas. So by having a local hospital that can provide that relationship building for our community is also extremely important. So whatever we can do to support the hospital in Wallaceburg, that's what we need to do that on behalf of Walpole Island as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Faye. I guess. Thank you, Mr. Budget Chair and Council. I'm Bob Hockney, and I'm the board chair of the Chatham-Kent Health Alliance Foundation. And tonight I will speak to you regarding the local share element of the Chatham-Kent Health Alliance Wallaceburg site redevelopment. So all Ministry of Health major projects, such as the Wallaceburg site redevelopment, and as per the Ministry of Health directive, requires the local community to participate financially in these projects. So a portion of the total project construction cost, amounting to 10% of the construction cost, is required to be raised by the local community, with the Ministry of Health covering the cost of the remaining 90%. So the Ministry of Health portion covers everything from the cost of bricks and mortar down to consultation and design costs. The Ministry of Health, however, does not cover the cost of furniture, fixtures, and equipment, which is known as FFE. The local community is required to cover 100% of the cost of FFE. So the consultant's report has come back and has estimated the total project cost to be $41 million, based on construction beginning in late 2024, as was presented tonight in our timeline. The FFE is estimated to be $4.8 million, also based on that 2024 timeline. So this means that the total Chatham-Kent local share will be $8.9 million. $4.1 million coming from the 10% construction cost, and $4.8 million coming from the FF&E. So it's the vision of the Chatham-Kent Health Alliance Foundation that through the generosity of our community, we invest in program innovation, new equipment, modern facilities to enable world-class healthcare in Chatham-Kent. So I'll now turn the podium over to Mary Lou Crowley, President and CEO of the Chatham-Kent Health Alliance Foundation, to share more information on the local share element. Mary Lou.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you to each member of you here at Council and for having us here tonight. As part of our local share commitment, we as a foundation have done some homework, and we have benchmarked against other institutions and hospitals to determine their experience in reaching out to their municipalities for support. As you can see from this slide, there are representatives of the hospitals that have undergone some redevelopment and development projects. The level of support are indicated. You can see it varies, truly depending on the municipality, but one thing is common. Each one did receive significant support. Let me flip to the next slide, which provides a more local snapshot of the municipal support for local projects right here in Chatham-Kent. The obvious takeaway for us here today is that the municipality has been extremely generous and supportive to all local charities and nonprofit organizations. So if I may, I would like to say on behalf of all charities, thank you very much for your support. On this slide, we outline our ask of you. CKHA and the Foundation are here today to respectfully request a gift of $4.5 million, which represents 50% of the local share for the Wallaceburg site redevelopment project. When you consider this request, think about the incredible impact this investment will have for our entire community that we've heard earlier today in our presentation. I have the privilege of out and about of all of Chatham-Kent, speaking with donors and potential donors, and one common theme I hear over and over is access to local health care. People are proud of our hospital, both in Wallaceburg and here in Chatham. As a result, I hear so many comments about the concerns from residents here in Chatham-Kent about how much they want to ensure that their hospital will continue to thrive. This significant gift and partnership that we're requesting today will go a long ways towards easing the concerns of our citizens and will help solidify excellence right here, healthcare in Chatham-Kent. I get the privilege every day of inspiring our community with the healthcare that we have right here, both in Chatham and Wallaceburg. I, like you, want to inspire others in Chatham-Kent to support what's well needed in our community, but to keep it local. Our community depends on our healthcare system. It's the health and well-being of each and every one of us. Our next slide talks a little bit about our upcoming communication initiatives that ties right into the future of our healthcare. Continued updates on the redevelopment specific website is www.ourhospitalourfuture.com and CKHA social media channels. The launch of our Hospital Our Future newsletter in 2023. The collaboration with community engagement consultant. Our foundation also has a new newsletter where I reach out to our prospective donors, our partnerships, our key stakeholders on a bi-weekly basis and provide updates on the impact of their generosity and commitment. We receive feedback on a regular basis when I get to my office and have people comment in regards to the great work that's being done right here in Chatham-Kent and how healthcare continues to be an important, very important, significant reason why we need to continue to invest. We also, as you know, Lori and the team at CKHA have dedicated monthly engagement opportunities with CKXS Radio as well as the foundation. We have ongoing internal and external communication and engagement opportunities. We want to thank you for your time here this evening. And for more information, please do reach out. You can reach me at the foundation office. You can follow the website to learn more about the redevelopment that's on the screen. We just want to thank you for your time, your understanding, your commitment, and your generosity, which you continue to do. Thank you for your time this evening. Happy to answer any questions.
Did we have any questions? Thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you very much.
So next up, we have Indwell.
Thank you very much for having me tonight. My name is Graham Cubitt. I'm the Director of Projects and Development with Indwell, and on behalf of our CEO, Jeff Nevin, who wasn't able to make it tonight, and Scott Brush, who's our launch manager locally, but is at a family wedding, with my colleague Natasha Tumler, who's our regional manager, I just really appreciate this opportunity to speak to you and as you make these really important decisions. I know that I've got a tough act to follow talking about funding after our hospital, because hospitals and healthcare are super important for our community. But I think that really Indwell is a part of that extension of what it means for you as a council to help shape our community in a way that helps improve people's health, wellness, and belonging. And those are the three core elements that really Indwell's here for. I won't assume that all of you know everything about Indwell, so I'll give a very quick update or summary of what we are. Founded in 1974, we're a registered charity. We're based in Hamilton, but we're working in 8 municipalities across Ontario, fundamentally trying to address the challenge that is homelessness. It's a complex dynamic. It's individual for each person, we know that, but there's common themes that work. And the number one base for what works is supportive long-term housing. And we just are so thankful to be able to build on that experience that we have, rooted in our values. While we are a Christian charity, we don't discriminate on who can live with us. We're open to anyone, but we are motivated by the values of dignity, love, and hope. And fundamentally, as I say, seeking to build communities for people with health, wellness, and belonging. I'm not talking about the total housing spectrum. We know housing is a very important issue right now, but really is focused on when people are coming out of shelters or out of hospital or out of precarious situations, needing to have something that they can afford. Typically ODSP would be an income for our tenants, or CPP, and being able to long-term afford their housing in a way that helps them achieve their recovery goals or achieve their personal goals, whether it's related to their health, mental health, or addiction, whether it's getting back to school, finishing an education, getting a job, reconnecting with family, etc. So it's in that supportive to affordable housing range. A couple key stats, the map's too small, but we've just passed 1,000 units that we've been able to help create in communities across Ontario. The closest would be in London, where we have just opened 72 units a month ago in November, and in St. Thomas, where we're working closely with that municipality on tackling the homelessness issues there, particularly in their downtown core. Homelessness is not, unfortunately, just a big city issue anymore. We know that, and you know that, so I don't have to talk about that problem. But what do we do about it? And how did we get here is one question, but then what do we do about it is really maybe the more important question. We know that we want our tenants to belong, and mental health issues, addiction issues are very often drivers away from community, away from family, the bonds that keep us connected. People lose employment, people quit school because of these things, and tragically end up often street homeless or otherwise precariously housed. Our goal is to bring people back into community and to become more self-sufficient, more able to meet the needs of themselves and their neighbors. And through that process, really, we've been able to not only bring people's lives back into community, but also many of the sites, many of the buildings that we've been able to adapt have been ones that have been left to go for too long, whether they're old contaminated sites, brownfields, whether they're old bars, rooming houses, strip clubs, nightclubs, whether they're churches that have become redundant due to declining congregations. And we have also built new buildings. And so it's through that process that we've been able to now, as I say, create 1,000 apartments. Over the last few years, I've been personally involved in many of those projects since 2004. And helping to lead that and really trying to find the common pieces that work. So here's a few photos of some of them. The one on the bottom right there is in Simcoe in Norfolk County, which we opened in 2016. Some of the others there are in Hamilton. offering a variety of supports. The top right is Harvey Woods Lofts in Woodstock, a conversion of a former knitting mill that had sat vacant for 20 years and is now home to 80 households in that building. And then this is just a little shot there from the London Free Press. A couple years ago in St. Thomas, we faced the same kind of challenge. What do we do about homelessness? The police chief said we can't arrest our way out of this crisis. We need a different way forward. And so working closely with community agencies, working closely with City Council, with our health partners at the hospital and other services, we've been able to launch a strategy starting with the most acute. 15 people came out of encampments, moved into housing, and now a year and just a couple of months later, most of those folks are ready to move into a longer-term, stable, supportive housing, which is great because we've got 45 apartments under construction that are going to open in May, along with the municipal fire hall. And so that's a step-by-step process that we're working with St. Thomas to see these solutions come to fruition. Which brings us to the conversation here locally in Chatham-Kent. NeighborLink, many of you know NeighborLink, brought these issues to our attention repeatedly in 2020 when they said, look, you have to come help us, you have to give us your advice. It started with Zoom calls, then they forced us into coming down and taking a look around. We said, guys, we're too far away, etc. But they said, no, you must help us because you know what to do, and we know that we need your expertise. Fast forward, we knew that the St. Agnes School came for sale. One of the supporters in the community here said, listen, we can help you figure out how to buy that school if you will commit to making a way forward here. Chatham-Kent Council, your colleagues at the time made a commitment to $100,000 to help with that sort of preliminary launch phase. We were able to hire a launch manager. Scott's been able to do a ton of networking, working alongside other agencies to figure out what's missing. We don't want to duplicate anything. We want to fill gaps rather than take away turf from anybody else or just do something that somebody else is already doing great. So we've been able to move forward, and with the advice of staff, particularly under April's leadership, with Polly and Ray, focus on what is really needed and what can we do to make a significant impact. So the idea is to create 95 units across a spectrum of housing, a variety of housing types, but also a spectrum of supports, and to be able to transform the existing school building and add on to it with new housing. And really through that process, be able to create a spectrum of supports so that people, when they can move, well, first of all, so we can move people out of shelter, can move people out of temporary and very sort of emergency responses into long-term trajectory of stable housing. We know that community engagement is super critical, and this is a hallmark of Indwell's approach right from the get-go. We know that you can't force, solutions, even if they might be the moral high ground. You can't tell people what really is best for them, and that these would be their good neighbors, so just like it. That's anchoring all of our experience in all of our communities, and so we've been very actively working with our neighbors there at 55 Croydon's our address, but the surrounding neighbors to St. Agnes. We've hosted barbecues, we had dozens of tours with people coming through in consensus. With very few, there's been no opposition so far. There's been consensus, some concerns, some questions, some legitimate points that we've needed to consider, but all of that has been constructive towards what could we do to use this site, to use this property, to honor the legacy of the school, and to create solutions that work for our community. So we've been really thrilled with that feedback. And much of it has been actually from colleague agencies or people in the neighborhood saying, can you keep that gym because we've always used it as a community. And so even simple things like that, we've made a commitment, yes, we're going to keep the gym as a community asset space for the broader neighborhood. Which brings us to tonight, and I acknowledge that I'm asking you for money, as well as everybody else as part of the budget, and the hospital, of course. But we'd like you to see this as a strategic investment, and fundamentally, actually, what we need you to do is to be a catalyst for the major investment that we know needs to come from the federal government particularly, and the provincial government as well. This little chart is probably easiest. I think you have a little handout that has more specific details in the package, but the way affordable housing works right now with the National Housing Strategy is the federal government wants a co-investor, i.e. the municipality, to come along first and to take the leadership. The feds don't lead, they follow. It's kind of the same with the province at the moment, and so what we need from you is to help us move the idea forward, to give the federal government particularly confidence that this is a local initiative or a locally supported initiative. In this chart, we're putting that number at $9,690,000. I'll get to this in a minute, but we don't actually believe that you need to spend that much money. We just need you to commit to it, and worst case scenario, spend it, but best case scenario, and most likely, to make a significantly smaller contribution in the end, and I'll explain how. The federal government, through the Rapid Housing Initiative, which is out right now, deadline for submissions is March 15th, is offering up to $330,000 per unit. We know that they won't accept applications, we had a call with them this afternoon, unless they are submitted by the municipality. I mean, they say they will, the rules say they will, but in practical terms, they're only going to grant funds to municipally submitted applications, even if it's from a third-party proponent like Indwell, with all of our experience. So that's a challenge for us. We'd like to apply for $12,720,000 from RHI. It's about $210,000 per unit, if I'm correct, which is much less than the 330 target that the federal government has, making it a very strategic investment. But they won't look at it if it's not backed by the municipality. And they won't look at it if it's not a completely viable business plan from the outset, which is why we have that $9.69 million request from Chatham-Kent. The other pieces from the province and from Indwell, we're very confident will come. Well, Indwell, obviously, we would commit. And the $5.25 million from the province, we believe is feasible to receive based on the other two pieces of the puzzle. This breaks down in this little chart. We've got CK at the bottom, Chatham-Kent Municipal Contribution at the bottom, and Indwell at the top, kind of at the bookends of a viable business plan. The province, some seed funding from CMHC, and the Rapid Housing Initiative, the core piece of the puzzle, rounding that out for the total budget of $31 million. There's two, we acknowledge that this is a bit complex, and I'm happy to sort of answer questions and try to piece it together, but there's two contingencies. If this all went south, and you made a commitment tonight, what would happen if we couldn't follow through? Well, if you make a commitment and we don't get Rapid Housing Initiative funding, which is a real risk because it's a national competition for those $1 billion, we won't abandon the project, we won't abandon the idea, but it just has to go back to find a different business plan. And CMHC is always changing their programs, and we'd have to sort of go back to the drawing board. The second part, of course, we know that the Ministry of Health and the hospital obviously is a key driver, is always putting funds out in different ways to fund the supports. There's no program that you apply to that says we want supports for this supportive housing program, and you have to kind of approach them to bring the funds together. And all of our experience across all of our projects is that we can secure that, but it doesn't come at the beginning. It comes close to when the project's about to open. So worst case scenario, we don't get the RHI, we go back to the drawing board. Best case scenario, we get RHI, these other pieces fall in place. You say you're on the hook for your commitment, but then over the next 3 years, as we develop this multi-part project, we continue to work with staff to take Chatham-Kent off the hook. And we've done this routinely. In St. Thomas, the municipality made a commitment of $3.8 million. In the end, they actually are only putting $800,000 into the project from capital reserves because provincial programs came out, 2 different rounds of it, they cobbled it together and took the municipality off the hook. Same things happened in Norfolk County, same things happened in Hamilton. In each of our situations, almost every time the municipality can make a commitment that they don't have to fully honor because other funds come to bear during the course of the development. So that's the core request we would make. There's a couple other things that are sort of in addition to that should say summary of additional requests, pardon me. One is to endorse our application or allow staff to work with us to submit the application for Rapid Housing Initiative through Chatham-Kent. As I say, we heard even this afternoon from CMHC, they're not really going to even look at proponents that are submitted independently. And the second part of the second one there is to have staff work with us to expedite timelines on the planning process. We've had good conversations so far with planning. It's in line with policies, et cetera, but there are sort of processes that could be expedited to make sure we can meet those rapid housing timelines. And then the third thing would be to continue to have staff work with us on finding those operating funds in due course. And we work very cooperatively with staff, obviously, to see those results. In the end, we know that Indwell's experience will benefit Chatham-Kent when we can bring this all to bear, but it is truly a collaborative effort to address the homelessness crisis, and it's truly a collaborative effort to build the kind of long-term permanent supportive housing that we know will work. So those are my comments as presented in the slides, and of course I'm very willing to answer any questions if you have any.
Thank you, and just understanding we won't be entertaining any motions tonight, but if we do have some questions, I think it's a good opportunity to ask them if anyone has any. Councillor Scotchy.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. Just out of curiosity, the funding matrix for the province seems to be quite significantly lower than the municipality, and I don't know if you can just kind of speak to that, because, you know, in my opinion, I guess you would think that you would see that to be reversed, that we would be like half of the province, not the other way around.
Through you, Chair, that's a very good question, and I appreciate your asking that, because in that graph definitely shows you know, maybe twice as much from the province, or from the municipalities, the province. In reality, our experience is that is actually reversed. The challenge right now is that the province doesn't have a program. Social Service Relief Fund, the Ontario Priorities Housing Initiative would be two examples of funds that have flowed to the municipality or flow to municipalities, you know, maybe on an annual basis. At the moment, those programs haven't been re-announced. The reality is that in order to apply for a rapid housing initiative, we have to show that we have a complete budget picture. But what St. Thomas did is make a $3.8 million commitment. We submit to CMHC, they start reviewing and go through the process. Meanwhile, back themselves out every time the province has funds available. Some of those funds were ones we advocated for in cooperation with the municipality to Municipal Affairs and Housing. We would like to see the number that Chatham-Kent is involved in the project in the 10 to 15% range rather than a 30+% range. And our commitment to you would be, we will work, you know, tirelessly to get that, to make that a reality, acknowledging that between now and sort of March 15th, we have to figure out a viable business plan in order to submit to Rapid Housing Initiative.
And just one follow-up question to Mr. Quinton. Gord, from like these are obviously one-time funds, so from these are all, would there be any potential identified reserves that we'd be having discussion with these coming out of? Because I'm looking at the costs associated with it and knowing that the percentage we would get up to like 18% pretty quickly with the hospital and this ask. So has staff kind of looked at that already, or how is that going to potentially play out once our discussions commence?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Tonight, we just more wanted to let the groups do the presentations, but we will have a detailed discussions on proposed funding mechanisms during our deliberations.
If I may respond to that as well, through you, Mr. Chair. I should have made clear that we wouldn't necessarily need this money in year one. This could be a multi-year commitment because it's obviously a multi-year project. It's not a cash flow issue per se, it's more of an existential commitment. And we're very happy to work out any or whatever necessary arrangements are with the municipality to figure out how to make the commitment. In St. Thomas, we worked with the Municipal Housing Facilities Agreement as one of the tools to be able to actually, while the municipality gave Indwell the money, we made a commitment that if we ever change mind, if we ever change ownership, the municipality has first right of refusal. Those funds, or even the property, go back to the municipality, as in reality, we are creating public infrastructure.
Mayor Caniff?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just when I look at the 9.69 million, and if there's a private donor, steps up and says, I want to give $1 million, that would come out of that 9.69, correct? Or is there, because when I see the budget, there's no budget for private donors, and where would that come out of?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's a fantastic point. Right now, our donations are lumped into that, sorry, but the light color, the Indwell budget there of 3.44 million. Right now, we do have a donation component within that you could make it a stipulation that if large donations come in, it doesn't take us off the hook, it takes you off the hook, because we're comfortable with our number there as it is, including the donations we've expected. If an unexpected large one like that came in, we'd work closely with you and staff, through staff obviously, to make sure the municipality, well, we'd like to get the municipal number down to less than, the 10% is our goal. So we would work to get that down.
Councillor Finn?
Thank you. Should all, because my one question was already answered, should all go well and you get all funding, what is your timeline that you're looking at right now?
Through you, sure. We would love to get construction started as soon as CMHC makes a commitment. They say that they're going to make a commitment within 90 days of March 15th. We know that those are a flexible 90 days, but regardless, if we have council support and a solid RHI application, we would begin, or we would continue, obviously, the planning work. We would continue work around stabilization or there's asbestos and other things like that obviously could start ahead of construction. And we'd continue to work with building staff to get permits ready to be ideally under construction this summer, early fall, in response to the RHI requirements. You have to be done within 18 months of signing the RHI agreement, so anything faster than that's obviously better. And we can obviously start with the school building because half of it's there already, and we would get started for sure late 2023, so this summer, fall.
Councillor Crew?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The last slide with the requests, can you flip to that? So, if I'm reading this correctly, it doesn't say anything on there, Council. Operating dollars, okay. So, I guess my question, Mr. Chair, is for Gord. So, I think you spoke about, you'd take this all back and discuss it. So that's where we could direct Polly's team and whoever to work with Indwell too. Because this is, we know this is needed, and I think almost all of us know about what Indwell is and the amazing work that they do, and it's needed. We need a whole bunch of them, but it's challenging because we're facing a lot of challenges. But to have our staff support with this project, how that would happen, Gord?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. April, Polly, and Ray have been working within Indwell, and none of them are here tonight, but that will be part of one of our deliberations nights where they will be answering to this request.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your time and these great questions. Thank you.
That's our last deputation of the evening. Before we move on to adjournment, if anyone has any questions regarding the presentation tonight, was a while ago now, this would be a great time to bring those up. As a reminder, we still have quite a bit of time before we start budget deliberations, so I would encourage anyone, if they do have information they want brought forward during that process, they need clarity, to use that intervening time to contact staff members to get that information so that we can really start that work on the 25th and hit the ground running. Any questions, Councillor Scacchi?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Brown, I think I heard, but I wasn't 100% certain. Did you indicate for this budget here that the insurance premiums, the increase was going to be coming out of reserves? Is that what you stated in your presentation?
Thank you, Mr. Budget Chair. Part of the increase will be coming out of reserves, or at least that's the recommendation in the budget. Not the full amount, but a chunk of it.
And then just the last follow-up question, with the kind of when you guys were going through the potential increases over the next several years, is that something you guys are going to be estimating over the next 4 years if we continue to see these types of increases, that it's going to be continuing to come out of our reserves? And the only reason why I'm asking that, and we'll talk more about it when we go through the actual process, is that I'm just not sure how we're going to continue to keep funding the premium if it keeps increasing like this from the reserves without seeing a significant impact. So,
thanks for the question through you, Mr. Budget Chair. So, in the 2023 budget, knowing how difficult of a budget it was, and Dave Taylor determined through his analysis that the reserve balance was sufficient enough to be able to help offset this year. However, I would take that as a more one-off request, and as we move forward, we will have to look at funding it through a tax increase.
Okay, the last thing I just wanted to say is that, you know, over the last 4 years, we've seen that's not going away. So it's just, you know, I guess until we see the reserves and I have a chance to look at that, it's just something that is concerning that we're gonna, you know, continue to deplete those over the next little bit, right? So, thanks.
Councillor Story?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Probably a question for Gord. I think you mentioned a rate stabilization fund. I'm not sure if I'm getting the wording correctly. Could you explain a little bit more about what that is, and is that a common approach by other municipalities? Is this a pretty standard operating procedure? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So as you move to a multi-year budget, you do have to basically set aside some contingencies for things that will come up out of the blue that cost a lot of money. And so what municipalities have done that moved to a multi-year budget, they also include funding a stabilization reserve in the first year of the budget. We have to do a lot of work on figuring out what an appropriate amount would be. But then as you go through the annual updates, you'll see where you're at and often pull from those stabilization budgets so that you can stick with the multi-year rate that's decided by council for the entire 4 years. So for, as an example, London's been doing a multi-year budget for 8 years now, I believe, or 12. And the pandemic came up in the middle of their last multi-year budget. And all the pressures that they had with housing issues and things like that. So that's what the purpose of a contingency reserve is.
So that is to cushion us against any future tax increases or a certain amount of tax increase. So if we said 6.35 for the next 4 years, for example, if we had something else come up that all of a sudden would affect that, we would draw from that to cushion us from another substantial tax increase?
Correct. And then when you go to your next multi-year budget, if you didn't need any of those funds, you would have built up a substantial reserve that can then be used to lower the next multi-year budget requirements.
And does that function as a typical reserve where that would come to council every time for us to approve the pulling of funds from that fund?
Yes, absolutely. Council would be the ones authorizing any transfer out of that reserve.
Okay, thanks very much.
Any other questions? Seeing none, before we adjourn, just a reminder, we'll be back here January 25th at 6. And for the public, the online information sessions on CK's Facebook Live feed are January the 18th at noon and January 19th at 7. So this session of the Budget Committee will recess until 6 p.m. on January 25th. As per the public notice bylaw, Chatham-Kent Council hereby gives public notice of its intention to hold public meetings and adopt the 2023 budget immediately following receipt of a recommended budget from the Chatham-Kent Budget Committee. The Budget Committee also gives public notice of the need to meet in closed session at any time during the budget deliberation process as permitted by the Municipal Act 2001. Do I have a mover and a seconder for that motion? Moved by Councillor Thompson, seconded by Councillor Story. All those in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none? Good night.